Well, hello there. I'm Irene, and welcome back to Storytelling on the Plains. It's just me again for part 2 here. And our last episode, we started the story of the Spade Ranch, and today we're going to finish it up and learn all about this very cool place up in Ellsworth, Nebraska. And Ellsworth really is right on the edge of where we like to cover. We don't like to go any farther east than that, but considering how large the Spade Ranch was, it definitely falls into western Nebraska and the things we like to talk about and cover. So when we left off, Bartlett Richards and William Comstock had one of the biggest ranches in the country. Part of the reason why were fences. They fenced off a large portion of their grazing area, which President Theodore Roosevelt wasn't too happy with. Today we're going to pick up the story with the fencing issue and finish telling the story of the Spade Ranch. So in order to make sure the fences were removed, President Roosevelt sent John S. Mosby to get the job done. Mosby was a former Confederate general who continued to serve the government after the Civil War. This was pretty common. We welcomed the South back a lot. Nobody was really truly punished for the breaking up of the country, and this was just a dude. He was a Confederate general and wanted to still work in the government and serve the country. I assume by the work that he did the rest of his life that he fought the war. Hey, we lost, but I still want to serve my country, so how can I do that? So Mosby was a special agent for the Department of the Interior and dealt with cattle barons in Nebraska and Colorado. He dealt with many men like Richards who were breaking that 1885 Van Wyck fencing law and obtaining fake homestead claims. You can discuss and argue all day long whether they're fake homestead claims or not. They were. I mean, if you're an old Civil War veteran and you have no intention of ever coming out to Nebraska to stake that claim, it's a fake claim. It's a fake claim. You're claiming it because you know you can turn around and get money for that claim from someone else. These normally you just file for the homestead claim and you go out there and you make your way, and it was a way after the Civil War to help expand west and to give people opportunities, and you got it for nothing. And if you could turn around and sell it and make money, you could. That was a flaw in the law. So yeah, they kind of were fake, but we can argue all day about that. Anyway, Mosby had originally just been working in Colorado, but he learned that the land agent for Nebraska lived in Iowa and wasn't supervising anything. Dude was just basically collecting a paycheck and didn't do anything. So we got a whole lot of people shirking responsibilities that allowed this whole thing to go on. Because we're now in 1902. This law was passed in 1885, and it's still not being enforced. You're creeping up on 20 years since the law went into effect, and it's not being enforced in a lot of places. So in Colorado, Mosby sent notices to landowners who removed their fencing, but this didn't work in Nebraska. So basically, the ranchers in Colorado, they'd get a letter from the government, hey, remove your fencing or this, that, and the other thing's going to happen. All right, and they removed the fences. But it didn't work in Nebraska. An Omaha grand jury said they would not issue an indictment against Bartlett Richards or any other resident. So they're absolutely going the legal route to keep themselves from removing the fences. And if you remember from our last episode, Richards went to Washington and testified in favor of a law where they could lease the land, and that law didn't pass, so they had to remove the fences, and they're still not removing the fences. So now they're going to state court, And in Omaha grand jury says, yeah, we're not issuing indictments against Bartlett Richards or anybody else that lives in the state. Mosby was called, and because of that, Mosby was called back to Washington to do other work, mostly to appease the Nebraska senators. What happened was the Nebraska senators in Washington were getting aggravated because they're getting call after call after call and letter after letter after letter. Kick this guy out. He's a pain in the butt. He's bugging us. And so, as things go, they're like, yeah, okay, Mosby's aggravating our very, very wealthy people in the state, so we're going to make sure he goes and does some other job. But that wasn't the end of the matter. The government sent out more lawyers, and they were successful in getting these indictments. So basically, the government tried the nice way with Mosby. Hey, man, you got fences, please take them down. These are the things that are going to happen if you don't take them down. So they took them down in Colorado. In Nebraska, yeah, no, we're going to court. And the courts favored the Nebraskan folks. And so the government said, all right, if that's how you want to do it, we're going to send a whole bunch of lawyers out. And they did. And they got 26 indictments. But they focused on Richards and Comstock because they had such a huge cattle empire. And if you think about it, they're most likely the biggest in the state. They're one of the top operations in the country. You take them down, all the smaller guys are going to be like, oh, okay, we'll take our fences down, if you can get the big guys. So I'm going to quote from History Nebraska here. In 1905, Bartlett Richards and Will Comstock were charged in federal court with illegally fencing public lands. In June of 1905, they testified that they had not fence-surveyed government land. A force of Secret Service men entered the area of the Spade Ranch and extended the lines of the original government surveys. In so doing, they demonstrated that the Nebraska Land and Feeding Company had illegally enclosed 212,000 acres of government land. Before the November trial held in Omaha, Richards and Comstock pled guilty. Attorney Richard S. Hall spoke on Richards and Comstock's behalf, stating, "It is our intention to comply with the law. We are removing the fences as rapidly as we can, but such as may remain, we have nothing to do with. Wherever the government shows us we have an unlawful fence, we will remove it." On November 13th, they were sentenced to pay a fine of $300 each and remain in the custody of the U.S. Marshal for 6 hours. They were also ordered to pay half the court costs. The perceived leniency of the sentence and the manner in which the convicted men spent their imprisonment, the 6 hours supposedly were spent at the Omaha Club, aroused the ire of President Theodore Roosevelt, who removed the U.S. Attorney and Marshal in the case. So let me give you a little bit more details on that. The rumor at the time was that U.S. Marshal Thomas L. Matthews escorted Richards and Comstock to the Omaha Club, where where their time was served, involving dinner and conversation. As you can imagine, this story gets back to Roosevelt. He's totally not happy. They're already getting off lenient with a $300 fine, and they got to spend 6 hours in the custody of the U.S. Marshal. But that's massively lenient for how much they've been violating the law for now 20 years. But the government wanted the fences down. So they probably gave the lenient sentence because Richards and Comstock said, "Yeah, okay, we'll take them down. Y'all brought us to court now. We'll take them down." So Roosevelt fires the district attorney Baxter and Matthews. According to Richards' son's book, instead of serving their sentence in a jail cell, they returned to their hotel rooms, packed their stuff, wrote letters, shopped, and ate dinner so they could meet the train at 11 p.m. back to Ellsworth. It still doesn't make them look good, but it makes them look a little better than grabbing the marshal and going out on the town for a few hours. Think about it. How many times have you seen a court case where the sentence comes down and you're like, what? That's not a sentence for the crime. What? It's kind of what happened here. Again, Bartlett Richards and Will Comstock were super duper wealthy, and they get a different sentence than you or I would get. So in 1906, Richards and Comstock were indicted again. So just a year later, they're indicted again. This time on a conspiracy to deprive the government of public land charge. Maybe if they had just stayed in the jail cell, things wouldn't, I don't know. Who knows? The U.S. Secret Service had spent 13 months investigating them. The trial began in November 1906, and they were convicted of land fraud and conspiracy to commit perjury less than a month later. I've found some conflicting dates of the trial from official sources, so I'm not going to put the dates in there because I wasn't able to confirm them by the time I'm recording this episode, but it did take less than a month. I think it was around 24 days for them to be convicted. They were found guilty on 35 of 38 charges and ordered to pay a fine of $1,500 each and serve a year in jail. I've also seen where it said 8 months instead of a year. I'm pretty sure it was a year. That's why I went with a year. More sources had a year than the 8 months. The $1,500 fine in 2026 is $55,503.33, and there was a motion for a new trial, but that was overruled. So they applied and were released on a $5,000 bond. That's a lot of money today. I mean, if you go to jail and you need to get $5,000 to get out of jail, that's a lot of money. It is for me. But adjusted for inflation, that $5,000 today is $189,215.91. That's a hefty amount of money you got to put up to get out of jail. And if you think about it, some folks that have been arrested, they put their house up for the bond because they can't meet that $189,000. And so if they don't show up, they end up losing their house. So the appellate court also ruled against Richards and Comstock, and the Supreme Court declined to hear the case. So they took it all the way up to the Supreme Court, and they're out on bond that entire time, still making money, still ranching, yada, yada, yada. They were ordered to surrender, and Richards arrived in Omaha on December 7th, 1910, where he was transferred to the Adams County Jail in Hastings, Nebraska. There were rumors that were reported by the press that Richards and Comstock were receiving special treatment, but that wasn't true. I didn't find anything other than the usual rumor stuff. In June 1911, Richards was granted permission to travel to the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota for gallstone surgery. He returned to the prison in Hastings on August 10th. So he was gone June, July, and the beginning of August to get gallstone surgery and recover from it. I've never had gallstones, but I've heard they're horrifically painful. And I guess it was successful because he came back to the jail. So Richards never stopped proclaiming his innocence. He continued to say he didn't do anything wrong. He refused all visitors, but he did write to his family in Tranquillo in California, and he had plans for the future and continuing on in his life once he got out of prison. And most likely things would have just went back to normal, assuming by the time he got out of the jail a year later all the fences were gone. He's still got a massive cattle operation, and he's involved in banking and a whole bunch of other things. So he's wealthy. He's going to be okay. So, except for one thing. Bartlett Richards died on September 5th, 1911, age 49, in a Hastings hospital 1 month before his sentence ended. His body was buried in Wethersfield Bow Cemetery in Wethersfield Bow, Windsor County, Vermont. In 1970, he was inducted into the Hall of Great Westerners of the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum. I'm just thinking that the folks that put him into that Hall of Fame probably don't think he did anything wrong either. Looking back on it, it's a confusing time. Maybe some of what you did is shady, but overall, did you contribute to society? That's for other people to judge. I'm not going to judge that. He really didn't think he had done anything wrong, and it did kind of seem like there toward the end the government was out to get him, and I think it probably goes back to the rumor about how he spent his time in custody. They already were like, "Yep, we'll remove the fences," and then they get word that, oh, he's out, partying at the Omaha Club, when he wasn't. But that the real story doesn't get back to the president, and the president's like, well, I fired 2 dudes over this because y'all didn't do your job, and now he's flaunting around that he got off easy when that's not really what he did. So I think, they already had all the other evidence with the Secret Service that they could bring a separate case. It's crappy all around, and I don't know if did he die of complications from the gallbladder surgery? I would assume no, because he spent 2 months in Minnesota getting the surgery and recovering from it, and I don't think they would have sent him back to the jail if they didn't think he was okay. So I'm not totally sure what he died from, but unfortunately he did not. He did not live long enough to get back out of jail. According to the Flatwater Free Press article, doctors called it elytus or inflammation of the small intestine. I don't know if this is something that happens after gallstone surgery. I'm not a doctor. It could have been just a separate issue. And, he went for gallstone surgery. That's what he did. He was okay. He went back to jail, and he had this other thing turn up in the last month before he died. So I'm going to read from the article as well. So keenly did Mr. Richards feel the sting of the trial, conviction, and the wearing of the convict's garb that it is said he became a changed man at once, wrote the Los Angeles Herald. And with the progression of time, that humiliation increased until it ate its way into the innermost recess of his heart and caused it to break. I can get that. I've been pretty open about my stomach issues I've had in the last year, and it's pretty much we're still trying to treat it and figure out how to work it out, but it's related to the stress and trauma that I endured as a child. So I can totally see this man. He is completely convinced that he's innocent. He didn't do anything wrong. When the government said, hey, you got to take the fences down, he said, okay, I'll take the fences down. And then they still came after him anyway. That's an incredible amount of stress to be under, and it's a lot of trauma for someone who has just been successful his whole life. I also had a boss who he was successful in his life. Everything he tried, he did. And then he was put in a position in his company that he didn't want to be in, and he was struggling in that position, and he chose to take his life. We all deal with things in different ways, and it just seems like this conviction literally ate him alive. It caused issues in his small intestine, which caused it to inflame. And if, it's 1911, you don't really have a lot of ways to bring that down. It's going to eat at you from the inside and kill you. So I can see where that happened. Now, apparently his wife was on a train from California to see him when he died. I don't know if they knew death was imminent or if she was just making another attempt to see him, because the accounts that I read said that he didn't want family coming to see him. And he turned all of his visitors away. So he had visitors, and maybe it was just another attempt of Inez to come in and see him, and, knowing she's probably going to get turned away, but she wants to see her husband. Or maybe they knew he didn't have long to live, and they made a call, and she was trying to get to the jail to see him before it happened. But she was on the train and hadn't yet reached Bartlett when he passed. So Will Comstock first heard the news of his partner's death, he is reported to have said, "May the angels guide you into paradise, and may the martyrs come to meet you." The next day, William Comstock was released and his sentence commuted by order of President William Taft so as to attend the funeral of his business partner in San Diego. So this is a little confusing to me. I don't know if the body was shipped to San Diego for the services or not, because if you remember, I mentioned he was buried back in Vermont, where he was originally from. The Spade Ranch is still there. Before they went to jail, Richards was struggling with his health. Also, the trial and the appeals caused a lot of financial difficulties on the ranch and the Nebraska Land Company. No one was in charge of the ranch while they were in jail. I don't know why. He's only got a year sentence. Why isn't anybody helping to take care of stuff? After his death, Comstock took over the ranch, and his family and Richard's family spent summers there. And Comstock closed the Sea Bar and the Overton ranches in 1912, and he died of cancer in 1916. So Comstock got out of jail a little early so he could go to Bartlett Richards' funeral. Maybe they just had the services in California and they already shipped the body to Vermont. I don't know. But he was basically given an early compassionate release. And he told Inez not to keep control of the ranch. I think he saw what was coming. The Kincaid Act was set to devastate the Spade Ranch. Free range was no longer legal. So you can't, even if there aren't any fences, you can't free range your cattle out there on government land. We had that issue a few years ago with another rich cattle rancher. I'm forgetting the guy's name. It was out, I want to say Arizona, and the dude had been grazing on government land for decades. And those folks are shady. I cannot remember the name right now, but those folks are shady, and they've been breaking the law for years. I do not think Bartlett Richards was intentionally doing this other than trying to go down that settlement method of he thinks this law is going to pass, and then what he's already got up will be okay. It just ended poorly for him. And when Comstock was talking to Inez, he told her, when I'm gone, just sell it, just sell it all. He saw what was coming. I think he saw the Kincaid Act was going to be passing, and was just like, just get rid of it. She didn't. The Nebraska Land and Feeding Company borrowed $200,000 from the New York Trust Company via a first mortgage on the Spade Ranch. That's $6,110,458.72 in 2026 dollars. So she's taken out a $6 million loan against the ranch. The Spade Ranch survived until 1923 when it was foreclosed on. At this point in time, the Spade Ranch had shrunk to 60,000 acres. But that's not the end of the story of the Spade Ranch. Yeah, the bank foreclosed on it, but that's not the end of the ranch's story. Cattlemen Edward M. Braza and Edward P. Myers, owners of the Sandhill Cattle Company, secured a lease in late 1923. So it's not foreclosed on for too long. They jumped on it right away. Management of the ranch was done by Lawrence Y. Bixby, who had once been employed by the Nebraska Land and Feeding Company. He had been on the ranch since 1909 when he was 13 years old. In 1908, his father, James Bixby, an Eastern professor, brought a homestead relinquishment 4 miles east of the Spade Ranch headquarters next to Bean Soup Lake after James had taken a teaching position for Bartlett Richards and William Comstock. So that's another thing that Bartlett Richards did was he hired a teacher out there. They got young folks out there. They got kids out there. They got other young folks. Probably some of the ranchers were probably, 15, 16, 17 years old, and Bartlett hires a teacher for everybody. On March 3rd, 1909, the rest of the family arrived at the rail siding in Ellsworth. As they freighted past the Spade Ranch store with milk cow trailing, the Spade foreman, Mike Peterson, saw them at the front porch and laughed when he saw the family's piano in the wagon and said, I'll just give them nesters 6 months. Lawrence would later write, before the Petersons left a few years later, Mike sold me his homestead for $11 an acre. So the Bixbys had staying power, and Mike Peterson ended up leaving and selling his homestead. They chose the tranquil name of Cloverleaf Ranch for their new homestead, but in the first year, a rattlesnake bit their dog. James killed a wolf, and a neighbor threatened to contest Lawrence's sister Ina's homestead filing unless they gave him a cow, calf, and a spool of wire. A 2-room sod house was to be their home until 1914 when they hauled $427 in lumber from Bingham for a frame house. So it wasn't easy. A rattlesnake bites their dog. I'm assuming the dog died. James had to kill a wolf, and a neighbor's threatened Lawrence's sister's claims. Give me a cow and a calf and a spool of wire, and we'll stop challenging your claim. That's crazy. So his mother, Jenny, was offered a job cooking for the ranch. The Spade always had cook trouble. They'd ship in a cook from Denver, and the cook would line up all the extracts he could get and drink it all, Lawrence said. They would come down to the homestead and get Mother to cook. I used to go up and help her at the cookhouse. I just think that's hilarious. How many times did they hire cooks that ended up drinking anything that had alcohol in it before they went to Lawrence's mom? She was right there the whole time. Oh, gosh. So Lawrence's first job for the Spade was operating an 8-foot sulky rake during haying. In 1909, Bartlett Richards bought 20,000 head of cattle delivered from Mexico. That November, it didn't stop snowing. The Spade lost 10,000 head of those cattle. There was a pile of hides in Ellsworth as big as the depot. My brother Oni and I skinned cows all winter for 50 cents a cow, 25 cents per calf. We tried to skin the dead cattle before they froze. And this is what I was talking about in the first part of this episode. It's horrible when your cattle freeze. I'm not sure what kind of insurance they had back then. Today you can file claims so you don't have to do this, but they're dealing with blizzard conditions. It's snowing too dang much. Their cattle are dying because of the snow, and now they're trying to still find a way to make some money off of these dead cows. In my opinion, either the insurance didn't cover everything, or there wasn't any, and I'm guessing there wasn't any back then. It's a horrible thing to do. You're struggling to survive, and they managed to do it. So back to the article here, or sorry, the book. During the sub-zero weather, as many as 30 Mexican cows a night might die in the rushes of the East Spade home valley alone. One afternoon, Bartlett Richards' yellow buggy approached. He got out of his cart, Lawrence wrote, helped us turn the cow on her back, and said, hurry up, you kids, get that hide off and get home before you freeze. So even he's saying, hurry up, it's too dang cold out here. The cows are already dying. You guys are going to die out here too if you stay out here too much longer. Lawrence attended rural schools until 1911, when he went to stay in Lincoln with his father's cousin, Dr. Ammi L. Bixby. When Lawrence was old enough to file on a homestead of his own, he described his land on the Alki Meadow as a 1/4 mile deep and 2 miles wide, but he met requirements and received a patent on the string of 40s. Lawrence's father, James, died in 1918, and his mother, Jenny, along with Lawrence, operated their land and cattle for a time as Mrs. J.H. Bixby and Sons. So they're making it work. It's not easy, but they're making it work out here. Lawrence worked for a while and got married to Eleanor Riordan when he was hired by Brass and Meyer. And if you remember, Brass and Meyer were the guys that bought the Spade Ranch after Comstock died, and his wife tried to keep things going, and the ranch got foreclosed. It was Brassa and Myers that bought it at a foreclosure and tried to revive or keep the ranch going. And so now they're hiring Lawrence to be their main dude at the ranch. Brass depended on Lawrence to know the right place to put new cattle out in the pastures. This makes total sense because Lawrence has been working there years at this point in time. He came in 1909. It's now 1919, 1920. So he knows the entire ranch. He knows the good spots. He knows where to put new cattle out. It's another good hire. When he had the opportunity to buy into the Spade Ranch, Brass loaned him the money to do it. So that's how well-respected Lawrence Bixby was. He knew the ranch. He knew it well. He did a good job. He did what needed to be done on his own little property there. And they said, yeah, okay, we want you to manage our stuff because you know what you're doing. And then now he has some money to buy, there's an opportunity to buy into the Spade Ranch. And the guy that hired him to manage it was like, well, I can loan you the money for that. Your boss doesn't do that unless you are good and your boss knows you're going to succeed. I don't care if you're talking 1500, 1918, or 2025. Your boss ain't going to loan you the money unless they know you're good for it and you're not going to screw up. So Lawrence was smart in this endeavor. After Meyer died, his company was dissolved, and by the late 1930s, Lawrence was a man known to hire the best and rarely fired anyone. So he bought in at the right time. Dude dies. He's able to, have more of the ranch, and he's pretty much taken over the ranch. But because he's the best, he demands the best. So he hires the best, and I would assume pays them well, and he rarely fired anyone. So he either took people under his wing and taught them, or he didn't have much issues with folks. This is all just right place, right time, with the right people. Lawrence purchased the ranch's first airplane, a Piper J3 Cub, in 1947. It was too small for him, so he gave it to his kids. I really want to have that kind of money. He bought another one, which he said had flown more than 100,000 miles over the ranch. Planes were vital during this time to places like the secluded Spade Ranch, especially for things like the 49 blizzard. And I can tell you I have a whole bunch of notes on the 49 blizzard, and I will get to writing about that here sometime in the future, but it was everywhere. Kimball all the way up to the South Dakota border. It was bad. It was really, really bad. And you need a plane to fly over your 60,000 acres to find out where are your cattle, are they okay, what's going on, how are we going to get food to them. Planes are vital in things like blizzards. So Lawrence served on the executive board of the Nebraska Stock Growers Association, Nebraska Beef Council, the Highway 27 Association, Sheridan County Draft Board, and in 1954 was elected president of the Nebraska Flying Farmers and Ranchers Association. Lawrence hosted fly-ins, rodeos, barbecues, ball games, and dances through the years and believed that a handshake answered better than words. And he was old school. We shake on it, we got a deal. We don't need any paperwork. This is a deal. We're going to honor our handshake. That doesn't happen a lot anymore. Maybe between friends, I'll be there on Saturday to help you move. But even in his business, handshake was better than words. It was through Lawrence's efforts that Bartlett Richards was inducted into the National Cowboy Hall of Fame. Lawrence's own work in saving the Spade Ranch didn't go unnoticed. So Lawrence was a big advocate of getting Bartlett Richards into the National Cowboy Hall of Fame. I think it's well-deserved. Nobody has a clean past. And I don't think Bartlett Richards did anything out of malice. Again, we can discuss that all day long. It was what people did, and he was doing what everybody else did and figured that it would work. And we can sit here all we want 100 years later, 120 years later, and go, yeah, you probably shouldn't have done that. That's kind of shady. But when everyone does it, and it's okay and technically legal, you fall into those gray areas of what do you do? Anyway, in 1980, Lawrence was named a patron member of the National Cowboy Hall of Fame. And I'm going to quote from the book again. During his ownership, Bixby planted thousands of trees in the home valley around the Spade Ranch and installed airstrips for the ranch airplanes. In addition to reviving the Spade Ranch, Lawrence Bixby also returned the Richards home in Ellsworth, Nebraska to noteworthy status. Since the time of the Richards ownership, the house has been divided into apartments and was in disrepair. In 1953 to 54, Lawrence and his wife Eleanor moved to the Ellsworth house after it was rehabilitated. In 1965, the ranch headquarters included the large 1889 Comstock Bixby house where Lawrence's son Jim and family lived. Another residence built in 1952 for Lawrence's other son Larry and family, 3 large bunkhouses, the 1879 log cookhouse, large 1889 barn, cattle dipping vat, livestock scales, feed yards, large corrals for working with cattle and breaking horses, calving barns, 1895 blacksmith shop, cattle feed storage facilities, a machine shop, and a large 3-aircraft hangar. That's a lot. But it was all still there. Lawrence also donated $60,000 in 1954 to help pave Nebraska State Highway 27 from Ellsworth to Gordon. That's $742,795.54 in 2026. That's a lot, and he understood the value and the need for that road, and that it needed to be done. So he just donated the money to get it done. Lawrence Bixby, 86, died of heart failure on May 26, 1982. Ranch operations passed to his son James, who was a professional rodeo cowboy roping calves. He kept up the Spade Ranch tradition of only using horses and cowboys for daily ranch operations. So if you go and follow folks moving their cattle today, a lot of people use 4x4s. They still used horses and cowboys, so they're not using 4x4s. He transitioned the herd from Hereford to Angus cattle because of changing demands in the market, and he passed away from cattle in 1990. And his son, so Lawrence's grandson, Brett, a professional steer roper, and his wife Colleen have run the ranch since. Their children also work on the ranch and plan to continue as fifth-generation cattlemen when the time comes. While they have evolved to meet the challenges of the 20th century, the traditions remain at the Spade Ranch. Nearly all of the original buildings in the home valley of the Spade Ranch are extant and functioning in their original capacity. While they are a smaller operation than when Richards and Comstock owned it, they still need people harvesting hay, calving, and doing roundups for branding and markets. They do use their plane for finding cattle in the large pastures and for spotting broken fences. So they do have some fencing, but it's all legal and legit today. Bixby Black Angus cattle is also recognized nationally for its high quality and genetics. The family also spends time working with the Nebraska State Historical Society and Chadron State College to preserve the sandhills. State Historical Preservation Officer Martin F. Kivett once said, "The Spade Ranch is significant to the agricultural history and settlement of the Great Plains region of the United States. The original owners of the ranch, Bartlett Richards and William Comstock, were among the few who proved the Nebraska sandhills, if handled properly, made good grazing land. Because of the ranch's notoriety during the fencing and land conspiracy trials of the early 20th century, the Spade Ranch has become a legend in the history of cattle ranching in the Great Plains. The ranch is owned and operated by Lawrence Bixby and sons Larry and James of Ellsworth." So he obviously said this when Lawrence was still alive. So the ranch is still little secluded. Ellsworth itself is not a big place on the map in Nebraska, but through hard work, determination, and just knowing the ranching business and knowing how to ranch and how to take care of cattle, these men have built an empire, have a little smaller empire today. Maybe they are just ranchers today and not empire, wealthy cattlemen, but they still take care of the cattle. By all accounts, the Bixbys follow the law. They don't have issues with it. Again, I know I've said it a few times during the 2 episodes. I don't think Richards and Comstock were feeling like they had broken any laws. And Richards went to his death believing that he had done the right thing, but he also did the right thing in showing up. You have to show up December 7th and start serving your term in jail. So he did, because it's the right thing to do. I think it was just, you have a law passed federally that's not enforced, and you take 15 years before you start enforcing it. And then in 20 years, this guy who's super wealthy, Bartlett Richards, is like, dudes, you don't enforce it. It's not, whatever. It's not a rule. We've tried to do things amenably. We're still trying to do things amenably. All right, fine. We'll take the fences down. And then I honestly think from reading the story, it seems like folks in Washington got really ticked off because they heard a rumor that they were partying because they got a lenient sentence. I don't know if that's true or not, but it caused another case to be brought against him. I just think the Spade Ranch is a very cool story to learn about and to know about, and that it's still here. I mean, it's been here more than 126 years. I think it's pushing 140. What was it, 1886? When the ranch was founded. So, you know, it's managed to survive through everything, through the legal issues, through the blizzards, through the terrible winters, and when it all is said and done, the Spade Ranch survives. So I hope you guys enjoyed this story. I enjoyed researching it and writing it. I will give you a little bit of a secret tidbit here. By the time I got done, I haven't written this much in quite a while, and by the time I got to the end of this story, I was like, I don't care about the ranch. I don't care about the ranch. And then I would find something. I'm like, oh man, that needs to go in part 1. And then I'd have to completely redo everything to fit it into part 1 and make it sound like it should sound. But I did enjoy learning about it. It's another place in Nebraska that I don't know much about. And now I know a whole bunch about. I probably still don't know as much as the families know about it, or the folks that live up in the Ellsworth area know about it. But now you know a little bit more about the Spade Ranch, and cattle ranching is still a big deal in Nebraska, particularly out here in western Nebraska. So I hope you enjoyed that story. Come back next time for another story. For now, I'm Irene, and this is Storytelling on the Plains.